Welcome to the Noble Ape Podcast, Ape Reality. I'm Tom Barbalet, and today, the May 2007 Mailout episode of the podcast. Wow, gosh, what a month it's been, what a month it has been previously. I'm going to start by talking about the website going down at the end of last month. Picture this, I'm in the process of looking for an agent for my Artificial Life book, and mysteriously my website and email account goes down over the 3 to 5 days where I am doing the most hectic correspondence with regards to the book project. So, these things just tend to come together, and unfortunately the Noble Ape website going down and my email address going down last month seemed to neatly coincide with a wide variety of things, including the recording of the audio mail out. So I decided, well, let's move everything around. So now there is an ultra-thin Noble Ape website with all the heavy back-end, podcasts and other large download items on the biota.org site, which shares a server with America's Army, which is going to be a recurring theme in this podcast. And there's just been so much stuff going on that I couldn't really talk about at the time that I thought, mail out to the side. So for the first time in, I think, probably 4 years, I actually missed a mail out last month. I felt pretty good about it, actually. I'm going to be honest. It was a good thing not putting out the mail out. And I'm sorry if you feel that you missed out on news, but maybe you went to Ape Reality or another source in order to get your fix of monthly Noble Ape-related news. The two main things that came out of which I'm going to do in succinct order was the Apple Intel development for WWDC, which I've already talked about in a previous podcast. Not really a lot to talk about, but something might happen. I passed my most recent version of the Noble Ape source back to Apple with some changes at the start of this month, and then passed them back a slightly more recent version of source a couple of days ago. One of the things I'm going to introduce is HeaderDoc, which is Apple's rarely used version of Doxygen, which is a documentation from header files, Perl script actually, and it goes through the header files and creates documentation based on that. I've started out with the Noble Toolkit, which I'm working on currently, just working out all the loose ends and the bits of formatting that work and don't work, and I'll roll that out through the remaining sections of the Noble Ape development, possibly up to the platform level. I don't think I'll include the platform layer currently. I'll just do all the core script, GUI, Noble, these kind of things, those directories, and create related documentation. It's always been a question for me who would use that documentation, but I still get about, 80 to 100 downloads of the Noble Ape source code in various forms through the month, and I think those 100 or so folk may actually enjoy a PDF or HTML cruisable version of what these various bits of source code actually do, which is the purpose of the HeaderDoc stuff. It's all for development purposes as opposed to kind of end-user interest, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. And moving into the book project, not a lot really to be said. Moved through one set of agents into another set of agents, and I'm waiting for more information back. I think this is probably a long-term kind of project where you pass it on, and then obviously there's going to be the publisher phase and these kind of things. But it's all moving in the right direction. I think the first set of agents who were connected with a certain philosopher of religion, let's just put it that way, I'm pretty glad that they didn't actually pick it up in some regards. So I will be looking forward to the next set of correspondence from certain agents, and it will enable me to talk frankly about that particular philosopher of religion in the future. So that's the book project currently, moving in the right direction, but just all very slowly. Part of the book project is this kind of feedback that I'm getting with regards to what is artificial life in what's typically called in the US a mainstream context. I don't like the idea of mainstream, but in any case, the way the general public view artificial life and whether there could ever be a blockbuster book written on artificial life, in part because of the kind of tarnish that has gone with artificial life in the past. So it's a strange thing that you're just standing on the backs of giants in some regards, and the giants that have wandered off in other directions have kind of left you mid-air with regards to artificial life. But that's a kind of ongoing project that I will muse about in future Ape Reality podcasts. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Cafe Press store associated with Noble Ape, because yesterday I sent a box of t-shirts and other related things to, of all people, some of the stars of MTV's Jackass and Viva La Bam and various movies and other things. Why would they be getting Noble Ape t-shirts? Well, I'm going to let you in on a little secret here, because I do another podcast called the Best Damn Podcast Ever. Episode 2020. I need to put this out in their feed of Ape Reality if you want to see, or hear more importantly, Tom Barbalet behaving completely unlike the somewhat educated, mindful individual that you hear about through these podcasts. I recommend you check out tbdpe.com, and I'm sending I guess would be called a PR parcel of information associated with the best damn podcast ever to these MTV folk. So this is breaking news for people associated with the best damn podcast ever. And in there are some Noble Ape t-shirts. So I thought for an interesting kind of mail-out muse, I would talk about the kind of people that have received Noble Ape t-shirts, because I'm gradually trying to cover the globe in Noble Ape t-shirts, and I'm not really sure whether anything comes back in terms of people looking at the website or things like that. But it just makes me feel good that these diversity of people will have Noble Ape t-shirts. So the Jackass crew. Obviously, I've t-shirted Intel and Apple over the past couple of years. Locally, Penn and Teller have Noble Ape t-shirts. The 1st Airborne Division in Iraq. Now this is an unusual crew. I had a box of maybe 15 Noble Ape t-shirts turn up at my office, and one of my co-workers' sons is in the 1st Airborne in Iraq, and I received a Noble Ape t-shirt. A wide variety of listeners to Ape Reality and other Noble Ape related folk. Grey Thumb in Boston, you know, the grassroots artificial life group, received a box of Noble Ape t-shirts. Basically, I'm trying to get as many Noble Ape t-shirts out to as many people as possible, and if this whole artificial life thing blows over, at least I've clothed a whole lot of people who probably don't need to be clothed anyway. One of the interesting things that's coming out is what's going to happen to the biota.org podcast, and as this is slightly Noble Ape related, I thought I'd throw some ideas out there. The biota.org podcast has been relatively quiet of late, and I've been trying to get a Steve Grand interview. I also want to talk to Bruce Damer because he's thinking of starting up an artificial life project, and I'm always interested in grabbing these kind of formative points of artificial life development as a means of capturing for a listening audience that may be novices or interested in developing artificial life what processes they need to go through in order to actually start a project. So with John P. Daigle, for example, it was very good to kind of, he started a group and was moving in a particular direction. It was great to chat with him in that phase to kind of capture that kind of moving on element. But the initial planning and the things that go out, I've recorded one podcast, I think, the Ape Reality feed, on, you know, what you need to do in order to create an artificial life project, and talking to someone like Bruce Damer, who really is the quintessential Renaissance man of North America in terms of his wide variety of ideas and folk that he's involved with, and, you know, he's a NASA scientist after all. A super intellectual type in terms of talking about what aspects, what approaches, what areas need to be considered when creating an artificial life project. He shot me an email that said basically that he needed to get in contact with John Klein with regards to how John Klein had evolved Carl Sims' early blocky creatures. I have brevet creatures running on a number of machines currently, and I need to contact John Klein actually about the kind of microevolution that I'm seeing rather than macroevolution. It's a bit like watching a racehorse kind of develop very, very slowly. My only frustration is that the development isn't slightly faster. I've gone back to Carl Sims' original paper to try to think about what parts could be tuned to get evolution slightly faster. And so this is the future of biota.org, is in fact now having interviewed a series of experts. Now the kind of level of people that are interested in being interviewed has kind of cropped down to discuss the ideas of creating an artificial life project and really kind of preaching to the soon-to-be converted, so to speak. So I think that's going to be a fascinating project with biota.org, and I'm starting with the Bruce Damer chats and also throw Steve Grand in the mix to kind of give some back-in-the-day meta-theory and also contrast with regards to the kind of contemporary open-source development in artificial life, how one can create a completely proprietary model and actually be quite successful in the medium term with regards to that. So anyway, this has been a slightly long and rambling podcast covering mail-out related topics and other musings. You can contact me, tom@nobel8.com. I love receiving email from folk. I send out Noble 8 t-shirts to folk that email me. I send out original manuals. I'm ready to get a t-shirt out to you no matter where you live in the globe, and the more obscure parts of the globe the better, actually, because it kind of, if I have a map with pins on it in terms of where the Noble 8 t-shirts are are going, when I send them to North Korea and Iraq and places like that, I feel really good about it. So if you're listening to this podcast in a particularly obscure location, like Omaha, Nebraska or somewhere like that, send me an email, tom@nobleape.com, get a Noble Ape t-shirt and let me know your thoughts on the podcast. I've been listening to a lot of new podcasts recently, and it strikes me that the more formatted podcasts, the podcasts that have various sections and listener feedback and things like that, tend to play a lot better than the kind of rambling rants that I put into Ape Reality. So that's something I've been thinking about recently too. I've also uncovered some old video footage of Tom in Sunnyvale in Northern California in 2000, talking about early startups and things like that. So I may scare the Ape Reality feed by inserting some video podcasts of Tom, just to indicate why there aren't video podcasts of Tom currently. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to this Mailout and episode of Ape Reality. You can find other Ape Reality episodes for Mailout listeners, nobleape.com/reality. Always interested in new listeners and new listener feedback, tom@nobleape.com. Thank you very much for tuning into this podcast. Look forward to tuning into the next podcast.